I still work long hauls across the interstate, but I'll never forget what happened to me last Tuesday on I-80 heading west through Nebraska. I've been driving trucks for about 15 years now, mostly solo runs because I prefer the quiet and my own company. Never had any problems before, never believed in ghost stories or any of that nonsense. I'm a practical guy. What you see is what you get, you know. But what happened that day still makes my hands shake when I think about it. I was about 6 hours into what should have been a routine 12-hour drive to Denver, hauling furniture for some big box store. The weather was clear, traffic was light, and I was making good time. Everything felt normal until I glanced up at my rearview mirror around 2 p.m. and saw something that made my blood run cold. There was someone sitting in my back seat. Just a dark shape like a shadow of a person, but I could make out what looked like shoulders and a head. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest because I knew for damn sure I was alone in that cab. I slammed on the brakes so hard that the truck behind me had to swerve into the next lane, laying on his horn like crazy. My hands were shaking as I threw the truck into park right there on the shoulder and spun around to look at the back seat. Nothing, absolutely nothing there except my spare jacket and a couple of empty coffee cups. I checked every inch of that sleeper cab, under the bunk behind, the seats, everywhere a person could possibly hide. The doors were still locked from the inside, windows were up, and there was no way anyone could have gotten in or out without me knowing. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes trying to convince myself I was just tired, that my eyes were playing tricks on me. Maybe I'd been staring at the road too long and my brain was filling in shapes that weren't there. I grabbed an energy drink from my cooler, splashed some cold water on my face and told myself to get it together. But even as I pulled back onto the highway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone anymore. For the next hour or so, I kept glancing up at that rearview mirror every few seconds, but I didn't see anything unusual. I started to relax, a little, thinking maybe I really had just been seeing things. The radio was playing some classic rock station and I was humming along, trying to get back into my normal driving rhythm. But then, right as I was passing through this little town called Grand Island, I caught another glimpse in the mirror. This time, it was clearer. Definitely the outline of a person sitting directly behind me, perfectly still. I could even make out what looked like dark clothes and pale hands resting on their knees. My stomach dropped, and I felt this cold sweat break out all over my body. I tried to stay calm this time, didn't hit the brakes or anything crazy like that. Instead, I slowly moved my eyes from the mirror to look over my shoulder, real casual-like, as if I was just checking my blind spot. The second I turned my head, it was gone again. Just my empty back seat staring back at me. That's when I started getting really freaked out. I mean, once could be exhaustion or my imagination, but twice. And this second time felt so much more real, so much more detailed. I could swear I even felt the cab shift slightly, like someone had actually sat down behind me. I pulled over at the next truck stop, which was about 20 miles down the road, and called my dispatcher to see if I could hand off the load to someone else. Told him I was feeling sick, which wasn't exactly a lie because my hands were still trembling and I felt like I might throw up. But he said there was nobody available and I was already behind schedule from my earlier stop. He basically told me to suck it up and finish the run, so I grabbed the biggest coffee they had, walked around the truck about 5 times, checking every single lock and latch, and got back on the road. I figured if I just kept my eyes forward and didn't look in that damn mirror, maybe whatever this was would just go away. But trying not to look at your rear-view mirror while driving a semi is basically impossible. You need it to change lanes, to see what's behind you, to do your job safely. Every time I glanced up, my heart would skip a beat, wondering if I'd see that shadow again. For about 2 hours, it was just normal road and sky reflecting back at me, and I started to think maybe I'd scared it away somehow by stopping at the truck stop. I was actually starting to feel a bit foolish about the whole thing, thinking I'd overreacted. Then, just as the sun was starting to set and casting these long shadows across the highway, I saw it again. This time it was different, though. The figure seemed to be leaning forward slightly, like it was trying to get closer to me. I could make out more details now, and what I saw made my mouth go completely dry. It looked like an older man, maybe in his 60s, wearing what appeared to be a dark jacket or coat. His face was pale, almost grey, and his eyes looked like they were staring right at me through the mirror. I was so focused on what I was seeing that I didn't realize I'd started drifting into the next lane until a car laid on its horn and flashed its lights at me. I jerked the wheel back and the whole truck swayed, which should have thrown around anyone sitting in the back. But when I looked in the mirror again, the figure was still there, completely unmoved, still, staring at me with those dead-looking eyes. That's when pure panic set in. I started hyperventilating and pulled over again, this time at some random exit with just a gas station and a McDonald's. I jumped out of the cab so fast I nearly fell face first onto the asphalt. My legs were shaking, so bad I could barely stand up. I walked around to the passenger side and yanked open the door, fully expecting to find someone sitting there. But it was empty, just like before. I even checked under the bunk bed, opened every single compartment, looked behind the seats with a flashlight. Nothing, absolutely nothing there. That's when this other trucker pulled up beside me. Older guy, with a grey beard, driving a red Peterbilt. He rolled down his window and asked if I was having engine trouble or something. I must have looked like hell, because he seemed genuinely concerned. I didn't know what to say at first, didn't want him, thinking I was crazy, but something about his face made me feel like I could trust him. So I told him what was happening, expecting him to laugh or tell me I needed sleep. Instead, his expression got real serious, and he said something that made my blood turn to ice. "You mean the guy in the dark jacket? Yeah, I saw him too when I was passing you about an hour back. Thought it was weird you had a passenger, since most of us solo drivers don't pick up hitchhikers anymore." I just stared at him, my mouth hanging open like an idiot. He'd seen it too. Someone else had actually seen this thing sitting in my truck. The other driver, who told me his name was Earl, pulled into the parking spot next to mine and got out to take a closer look at my cab. He walked around the truck with me, checking the doors and windows, looking as confused as I felt. "I definitely saw someone sitting behind you," he kept saying, shaking his head. "Clear as day, older fellow in dark clothes. But if you're saying there's nobody there..." He trailed off and gave me this look that was part sympathy, part fear. Then he told me something that made my knees nearly buckle. He said he'd heard stories from other drivers over the years about seeing passengers in empty trucks, always the same description. An older man in dark clothes who appears and disappears without explanation. "Most guys don't talk about it," Earl said, "because they think people will question their commercial license or their mental state. But it happens more than you'd think." He suggested I try switching routes or maybe taking a break for a few days, but I still had this load to deliver and bills to pay. Earl offered to follow me for a while, said he was heading west anyway and could keep an eye on my truck from behind. I was so grateful I nearly hugged the guy. Just knowing someone else would be watching made me feel a little less crazy and a lot less alone. We got back on the highway around 8 p.m., and for the first time in hours, I felt like I could breathe normally again. Earl stayed about 50 yards behind me in the right lane, and every time I looked in my side mirror, I could see his headlights. They're like a safety net. For about an hour, everything was fine. No shadow in the back seat, no weird feelings, just normal driving. I was starting to think maybe having a witness had somehow broken whatever spell this thing had over me. I even turned on some music and started to relax my death grip on the steering wheel. But then, my CB radio crackled to life, and Earl's voice came through sounding shaken. Buddy, you need to pull over right now. That passenger of yours is back, and he's moving around back there." My hands immediately started shaking again, and I looked up at the rearview mirror. Sure enough, the shadowy figure was there, but this time it was different. Instead of just sitting still, it seemed to be shifting around, like it was trying to get comfortable or maybe looking for something. I could see its head turning from side to side, and at one point, it looked like it was reaching for something near the floor of the cab. "I can see him clear as anything," Earl's voice continued over the radio. "He's definitely there, and he's definitely not normal. His movements are all wrong, too slow and jerky like a puppet or something." The description sent chills down my spine, because that's exactly what it looked like to me too, like someone was controlling a marionette. I managed to keep driving for another few miles, but the whole time I could feel this presence behind me getting stronger and stronger. It wasn't just visual anymore. I started hearing things too. Soft sounds like fabric rustling, the creak of the seat adjusting to weight, even what sounded like slow, deliberate breathing. The breathing was the worst part, because it seemed to be right behind my ear, even though I knew nothing was actually there when I turned around. Earl kept giving me updates over the CB. He's leaning forward now. Now he's sitting back again. Jesus, it looks like he's trying to reach toward the front of the cab. Every description matched exactly what I was seeing in my mirror, which somehow made it both more terrifying and more real. I felt like I was losing my mind, but having Earl confirm everything kept me from completely falling apart. Then around 10 p.m., something happened that still gives me nightmares. I was coming up on this long stretch of highway with no exits for about 30 miles, just darkness on both sides, broken up by the occasional farmhouse light. Earl had fallen back a bit because of slow traffic, and I was essentially alone again. I glanced up at the mirror and saw the figure, but this time it was looking directly at me, not just in my general direction, but making actual eye contact through the reflection. Its eyes were this pale, milky color, and its mouth was slightly open, like it was trying to say something. I felt this overwhelming sense of cold wash over me, like someone had opened a freezer door right behind my neck. That's when I heard it speak for the first time. Just one word, barely a whisper, but I heard it clear as day. "Stop!" My whole body went rigid, and I nearly drove right off the road. The voice sounded old and raspy, like someone who hadn't spoken in years, and it seemed to come from right behind my left ear. I floored it after that, pushing my rig way past the speed limit, desperate to get to the next truck stop or town or anywhere with lights and people. Earl's voice kept crackling over the CB, telling me to slow down, that he was losing sight of me, but I couldn't stop. The figure in my mirror was getting more agitated, moving around constantly now, and I swear I could feel the truck rocking slightly with its movements. Then just as I crested this hill and saw the lights of North Platte in the distance, everything stopped, just like that. 1 second the presence was there, heavy and cold and terrifying, and the next second it was gone. The oppressive feeling lifted, the cold disappeared, and when I looked in my rearview mirror I saw nothing but my empty back seat. Earl caught up to me at the truck stop in North Platte, and when he got out of his cab, the first thing he said was, "It just vanished about 5 miles back. 1 second I could see it clear as day, and then it was just gone." We both checked my truck again, and there was absolutely no sign that anyone had ever been there. That was 6 months ago, and I still can't explain what happened that night. I've driven that same route dozens of times since then, and I've never seen the figure again. Earl and I stay in touch, and he's never seen it either, though he's heard similar stories from 3 other drivers since then. I've done some research online, tried to find reports of accidents or deaths along that stretch of I-80, but nothing stands out. No tragic hitchhiker stories, no unexplained deaths, nothing that would explain why an old man in dark clothes would be haunting truck cabs. The whole thing just started and ended without any explanation, like it was never meant to make sense. I still drive alone, still make my living on the road, but I've installed an extra mirror that lets me see the entire back seat without having to turn around. Some people might call that paranoid, but after what I experienced, I need to know for sure that I'm really alone in my cab. Because whatever that thing was, wherever it came from, I have this feeling it could come back just as suddenly and inexplicably as it first appeared.